Hey everybody, that is Gary Smith.
Hello.
That is Kaz Kenny.
Kapow!
And I am Eddie Bramble, and this is episode 56 of the Blackwater's Edge podcast.
And we're growing,
56.
We are
getting there. Kaz, why don't you start us off with this week's fishing report?
So the fishing's been pretty much like stock markets, I would say. You know, we've had some good days, we've had some bad days. You know,
it has been up and down, boys.
There hasn't been much of a morning bite here the last 2 days just because of the cold temperatures. We've had a front push through in the last 24 hours. It's kind of shut the bite down a little bit. What you can expect to catch when you come down here, we're seeing a few crappie being caught at some of the bridges. We're seeing some white perch being caught that are still in here, you know, migrating and spawning. Lots of carp, lots of gizzard shad. Over in the Nanacoke, it's a lot of blue cats. Barren Creek, snakeheads, a few bass, some crappie, some yellow perch. Down off Athol Road, you know, they're getting some good snakeheads down there too. I heard of a few people finding some down in the, what's that area down there? Not Quantico, what's it called?
In Salisbury?
No, down there by, near Mardella Springs.
Barren Creek?
No, not Barren Creek. Like out past that, like Athol Road. No, not Hebron. If you say the name, I'll know it. I can't think of it. Anyway, out there past below Barren Creek and below Mardella, you know, they're catching some snakeheads out there in some of the ditches and stuff along the roadside edges back there where not a lot of people are looking, you know.
There's ain't like that there.
Right? There's a lot of open ground out there a lot of people don't know about, you know. Up the bay, you know, catching snakeheads and bass in Middle River here and a few yellow perch. Rockfish are everywhere they're catching, but you're not supposed to be fishing for them. I mean, there's fish everywhere. You know, that's just the bottom line. You got to move around. The biggest thing you got to play right now is water temperature, weather, and tides, you know? So that's kind of like the most important thing.
And that temperature is fighting against you right now.
Well, I've talked to some guys today that are out there fishing right now, and I'll tell you, I mean, a couple guys have found a few fish this afternoon. Most people have struck out, you know.
Yeah,
so
it's a
Water
struggle.
hadn't cooled down completely. Tonight's going to shut it down.
Yeah,
you got 40
no
to 50 mile an hour winds. You ain't doing much of nothing unless you got the wind to your back and you can cast with the wind. You know what I'm saying?
And that water's going to, would you say it's going to drop below freezing tonight, isn't it?
They said possibility of 28 in Dorchester County.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, the good news is we've had pretty high water. So
you can't navigate inside my house. It's just covered with plants. I was wearing my waist out in the yard digging up grass and bringing it in.
Well, at least he's not bringing the fish in, putting them in the bathtub or anything, you know, so that's a good thing. But, I mean, I've talked to some guys above Conowingo, you know, they're catching some nice crappie up there. I talked to a guy caught a pile of snakeheads in one of the coves above Conowingo Dam a couple days ago. I was really surprised to hear the numbers on that. We got some good stuff coming up.
Hold on. Were you really surprised about the numbers? Be honest.
No, I mean, not really. I mean, they would get in there. They're going to be numbers everywhere, you know what I mean, no matter where they go. So, you know, I mean, I think that the fish are spreading. They're catching them everywhere. You know, people don't have to travel as far to catch them anymore. You know, they can catch them at their home. So, you know, a lot of people are getting into the snakehead fishing, and a lot of people are really enjoying it. They like catching the fish. They like eating the fish. You know, I think, you know, the biggest thing that we're trying to promote is some healthy harvest. You know what I mean? Right. So, you know, we know we're not going to get rid of the snakeheads. We know we're not going to extinct the snakeheads. We know all that. But I think as a steward to the water, I have a responsibility. And if I see a problem, then I'm going to do what I have to do to be that person. You know what I mean? So I care about my waterways and I care about everything. The good thing is we got a lot of stuff to cover today, Eddie.
We definitely got a lot to
cover.
So
we got today. We talked to some people at Conowingo Dam about what's going on with the shad lift up there. We've got our best friend in the world, Dr. Joe Love.
Do you want to touch on that before we get into our guest? Or?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's kind of We'll wait till we get with Joe and we talk about the dam, and then we'll bring that into there because he may be able to help us out with some of the things there that we might not be.
He's going there tomorrow.
I know a lot of people have been asking about what they're doing with the fish, and we've got the answers for that. So, you know,
that's right.
We've done our part. We've looked out and tried to search to get the answers that you're asking for. We got a lot of questions you guys have posted on Facebook today that we're going to try to cover as much as we can, but we only got so many hours in a day, you know. Yeah, so
we only got 1 hour on the show.
That's right. So, I mean, as far as fishing goes, I mean, the fishing's been pretty good in most places. You know, when you get a cold snap, it's going to lull out, you know, so be willing to adjust to the circumstances you're presented with and adjust accordingly. You know what I mean? When it gets cold, I downsize my baits. I go with smaller lures. You know, they're not going to be as aggressive. They're going to look for an easy meal, you know, so you got to kind of think like a snakehead to catch a snakehead, I always say, so.
I don't want to think like a snakehead. That's a different kind of thinking for me. That's just my opinion. I don't know.
No.
Don't go there.
Don't do it. I don't have to think about that.
Why do I always open up something like a can of worms on this show? Every week I'm good for it. You know?
Oh man.
I don't know. That's not the new cliche for 2021. You
Oh,
won't
man.
see that on a T-shirt. Think like
No.
a snakehead.
No, that's a whole different level of thinking. We're not going to open that can of worms. But
I know some people that do, but we won't talk about that either.
that's true. Yeah. All right. So this week our special guest is Dr. Joe Love from Maryland DNR.
One
How
of my
you doing,
favorite
Joe?
guys out there.
How you doing, buddy?
Gentlemen, hey, how are you doing?
Good,
man.
Doing all right.
A lot of good
Thanks
stuff
for having
going.
me on. I appreciate it.
A lot of good stuff going on in the world right now, Joe, and we're glad to have you here to help us sort some of it out. And we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Lots of good stuff going on out there. I'm glad to hear that fishing report. I'm glad to hear people are catching fish. That's good. Good time of year for all of that. And every now and again, I do try and think like a snakehead.
Well, that's your job too.
Put
You're
that
supposed to
hat on
be.
Today. I'm going to do my best today. To
That's
think
right.
like a snakehead.
So we know
Glad to hear.
we know you've been on the show before, but for anybody who didn't listen to that last episode you were on, why don't you give a quick background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. No, I work at the Department of Natural Resources in their freshwater fisheries program, and I'm a fish squeezer. I'm a fish biologist by trade. So I started down in Louisiana. That's where I grew up, and I went to University of New Orleans down there. Worked on gar, worked in the estuary, worked on the Lake Pontchartrain and the Gulf of Mexico. Out in Arkansas, worked out there for a while. Then I came on over to Maryland in 2004, down at University of Maryland Eastern Shore, worked in the coastal bays over there. I got my feet wet in the Chesapeake Bay a little bit. But when I started working with the Department of Natural Resources in 2009, I really got wet. I started working with largemouth bass in the tidal waters. And because I was working with largemouth bass, I started working with snakehead. About 2010 or so, folks started getting a little concerned. Some of the bass anglers starting to get a little concerned about seeing snakeheads popping up in the Potomac. They were hooking into them with their tackle a little bit more frequently. And so they started asking questions about what that meant for the bass fishery. And because that was my job, or that is my job, to help protect that fishery, I started looking into it. So that's kind of where my love affair, for better for worse, began with snakeheads. And so for the past 10 or 15 years, I've been working with the species, and we've learned a lot since then. And so I'm happy to talk a little bit about what we know up to this point.
Joe, I want to talk a little bit about Blackwater first as we start to spread into the other areas and talk about things. So, a lot of people have questioned the survey that we did, all the work that's been done down here with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Maryland Department of Natural Resources. For those out there that are questioning the data, all this data has been peer reviewed, correct?
Yeah.
So, and this has all been this is all peer review approved data, and I want to make that statement so that folks know that what we're bringing to the table has been peer reviewed, and it is true. We're not making this stuff. We're not just throwing some numbers out there to the public. That we're really doing what we're supposed to do to try to really get some true data on these fish. Correct?
Yes. We're not in the business, and it's beyond my ethics to make up data.
Right.
And that's not what we're about. I take it personal. I'm somewhat offended that someone may think that. We don't have an agenda on this subject. We did the project because we had a question, and we answered the question. We're scientists, and we realized that, like all science, there needs to be continued exploration of the question. There's not a single study that defines the outcome, the answer. So we have multiple studies, and we get that. But I do find it a little offensive that someone thinks that this work is somehow tainted, and it's not. You use that word peer review, and I want to tell you that I've been publishing papers in the peer-reviewed journals since 2002, and so it's a long time. I'm an editor with the Fisheries, which is the nation's American Fisheries Society most widely circulated magazine, And, I've also reviewed bunches of papers. So I understand the peer review process pretty doggone well. And these data and our project was reviewed by Fish and Wildlife Service, by biologists internally within our own department. So, we have quality checks on the data, and I trust that my co-author, Josh, didn't make up data. I didn't make up data.
We'll have him next week here too, so we can ask him these same questions next week, huh?
Yeah, you can ask him if he made up any of the data that he collected out there. But look, we were out there on his different project before Snakeheads got out there, and in 2007, 2008, I was out there doing work before Snakeheads even got on the horizon, where they weren't even a thought in my head.
Right.
We were doing work then, and then after Snakeheads, we did the same project, and both Josh and I were the same researchers then as we were post Snakeheads. So, I saw firsthand. We pulled in the net. I saw firsthand what was going on out there. A lot of people can't say that because they didn't do that. But I can say that. And that's why I'm fairly confident in the data set. It's not just because I'm, analyzing numbers. It's because I was out there doing the work, and I saw what the situation was before, what the situation was after. That said, we continue the work. And, we just recently published a paper in Transactions of the American Fisheries Society, where we used a published model on how much snakehead can possibly eat, so that we could actually ask the question whether or not a population of snakehead could actually cause the changes that we think they cause in Blackwater. And so we did some research in that area and found out that, yes, they do have a significant impact on resources.
How much can they eat? How much can a population eat?
So we look at
just so the public understands real quick, Joe, I'm not trying to cut you off here. I just want the public to understand that what we're talking about here is a separate thing that you and Josh did separate from the survey. I understand that you and Josh just did something here recently on a project where you're trying to see what the fuel sources are and, how much they're eating and things like that. So I just want the public to know that that's what you're talking about right now. We're talking about, this other study that you guys did together to try to gauge how much they're eating, what the rate of eating is, that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
let's touch on that, but before we go there, Gary wants to ask you one thing before we get into that about the original study.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about the original study versus your second study and how things changed between the two?
What was the first study for? I mean, what was the purpose of collecting that data?
You mean before snakeheads were introduced?
Yes.
Yeah, the 2006-2007 year when you guys did that survey.
Yeah. So, I was at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore at the time, and I began working with a biologist at Fish and Wildlife Service out of the Annapolis office. And the question that we had on the refuge, the question that he had on the refuge was, what the community of fish looked like, because they were interested in trying to track anadromous fish like herring numbers over time. So no one up to that point had really done an assessment of the fish community at Blackwater, not a thorough one. And so we did that. And we continued the project for, a few months, about a year, and got some data on the subject, and then decided to continue surveying Blackwater for more months because we needed or wanted more data to try and characterize the ecosystem there. And then Josh came on with questions regarding white perch and the growth of white perch. So we continued surveying the area to help answer those questions. So there were a couple of different projects, one related to herring, one related to white perch. But at the core of the project was using the same gear that we used post Snakehead, counting the fish the same way that we counted.
Relative abundance. We're talking about the relative abundance, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're talking about counting the fish out of the net. We're talking about measuring the fish that came out of the net, identifying the fish to species, and doing that monthly. And the same locations that we surveyed post Snakehead. So even though the questions may vary a bit, the methodology stayed the same. Part of that is because Blackwater is a pain in the neck to survey.
It's a pain in the ass to fish. What are you talking about?
You know what? It ain't easy. And so when you find a methodology that works, you got to stick with it. And thank God we did. Because, 10 years later, after the introduction of Snakehead, we were able to go out there and essentially repeat the study and ask a different question. And this time ask, how has the community changed since abundance, since snakeheads have been introduced and became abundant?
And so what exactly did you find the difference in, and for those who haven't seen the study, what was the difference in the two surveys?
So we found that, interestingly, I guess maybe it's almost expectedly, we saw declines in species like white perch and in the numbers of white perch, in the numbers of bluegill. Diversity declined. We saw increases in some species like carp and gizzard shad.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's out of control right now with what we got with carp and shad. I got to tell you that.
You said a decrease, significant decrease?
Yeah. So, we looked at how the community, and it's, we not just a single species, but the species, all of the species that we collected in our gear, how those relative abundances changed. And what we saw were, meaningful, significant changes in the abundance of some of these species, including carp. I mean, the carp abundance increase, that's meaningful. So, the community changed, and it changed in a way that was almost expected, because we knew from the work on the Potomac that snakeheads were predator species of sunfish, for example. So we were expecting to see a change or a decline in the numbers of sunfish. And we did. And the same is true for white perch. But I think that, I'll speak for myself, a bit surprised to see how much of a change there was. I was not ready for that. Yeah. And when you see it, firsthand, it is, life-changing in some ways. So that was not great. But there were some legitimate criticisms. We addressed them in our paper there. Maybe there are other things that could affect the community there. And like I said at the onset of this, that's why there are multiple studies need to be done.
Right. I think the biggest criticism that I've heard people reference in your study is the change in salinity. Can you touch on that and on what you on whether you think that maybe the salinity was a bigger factor, or whether snakeheads were a bigger factor in the change of the relative abundance?
No, well, right. So, Little Blackwater River, salinity levels where we were, particularly at the upper, were freshwater then, and they are now. So when we're talking about salinity changes, really what we're talking about is the main stem of the Blackwater, where we also surveyed. So we surveyed sites in Little Blackwater, and we surveyed sites in the Blackwater. And in the Blackwater, yes, salinity levels decreased a bit.
So you're saying salinity levels are down now as opposed to before? Like, is that what we're saying?
They decreased a little bit, but
it's not enough to really how do I want to say? It's not real. The salinity changes are not enough to affect the community of fish here. Is that fair to say?
It's not enough to expect a change in that way. What we saw with the community is not enough to change that, and this is the reason. The species we're talking about are estuarine fish, right? So they're tolerant of these wide swings in salinity. Sunfishes are tolerant of wide swings in salinity. What the Blackwater, what the refuge wanted to do, what the Fish and Wildlife Service wanted to do, is to restore habitat for anadromous fish, for herring that find and focus on freshwater ecosystems to spawn. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about sunfish. We're talking about yellow perch. We're talking about white perch.
Right.
And these are, brackish water animals that were doing pretty well. And something happened.
Yeah, it's funny because, people talk about salinity to me all the time. And I know just from trapping bait and things like that, I catch bluegills right in the same ditch that I catch baby red drum.
Yeah.
I catch bluegills in the same ditch I catch little baby speckled trout. So
that should be a surprise to you, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a surprise. Yeah. I mean, they're a tolerant animal. But, like I said, man, we need multiple studies. And so, we've got this paper, this other paper that we worked on, Josh and I worked on and got published. Really what we wanted to do is learn if snakeheads could consume a significant biomass. And I say that because early on, and I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but early on in the Potomac, people were saying, well, snakeheads are eating just minnows. That's all they eat. Minnows, don't worry about it. I mean, I care about minnows. Don't get me wrong. I care about minnows.
My point, real quick, my point on this whole eating thing is this, I get it that bass eat some of the same things that snakeheads eat.
Well, bass eat snakeheads too.
Right.
That's one thing that people always point to, and it's true. Bass do eat snakeheads.
Sure.
Yeah. That's especially when I think one of the biggest things that when we teach people about catching snakeheads for harvest, especially when you target those fry ball parents, what you're doing is you're setting up for those bass to eat those fry. I think that's one of the biggest things people don't realize is when you can catch those parents off those fry balls, they're basically become minnows at that point for everything else.
My point though is kind of this, you have a fish here that we've introduced to the system that's growing to 15, 20 pounds versus a fish that's not really, you're seeing much more than in a tournament, lunker fish are 6 or 7 pounds, and your average fish in the tournament's probably 2.5 to 3 pounds, maybe not even that, maybe your average is only 1.5 to 3 pounds, and then you get them kicker bass, So I think the thing that I look at here is the simple fact of the out competing that's going to happen from the snakehead with the bass. You know what I'm saying? I get that the bass eat bluegill. Okay, but the bass ain't eating 18-inch carp like snakehead are. You know what I mean? Bass aren't eating 18-inch rockfish like snakehead are.
We're not eating pound-and-a-half bass.
Yeah,
right,
exactly. I mean, so and that's the flip side of the coin that I don't think anybody really is paying any attention to. I think that they live together eating popcorn, they go to movies, and they're all having a party. No, it's not like that. So
I love when you talk about snakeheads and bass eating popcorn together. That's the funniest thing to me.
I want to see them at the drive-in. I haven't even seen that on SpongeBob.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man!
But let's get back into this thing now. Let's jump into the study that you and Josh did about as far as forage and what they're consuming, because this should really, really, really open some eyeballs up right here with what you're about to present to the public.
Well, look, so we heard about at the Snakehead Symposium this model that had been developed to predict just how much snakeheads do eat. And it was presented during the symposium, and we decided...
Was this the symposium that they had with Odenkirk and everybody? Is that the symposium you're talking about? Okay.
Yes, sir. Sorry, that's correct.
Okay.
So we decided to use that model and build it to learn how much a population of snakehead could eat.
Wow, this is going to be interesting.
We used data from a diet study that was published by Ryan Saylor, and we used data published by John Odenkirk in a paper on population size for snakeheads. We used some of our own survey information. We used water temperature information that was published and freely available online for Potomac River. And we also did some prey preference studies at our regional office. And we just basically built this model or used the model to determine roughly how much snakehead could eat. Now, these are maximum values, and I want to state that, but we need to have a threshold. We have to have kind of an understanding of what the possibility is.
Yeah, what's the worst case scenario,
Exactly. And so, one of the things that we wanted to do is kind of calculate how much snakehead population could consume, and then look at, how that might change with the size of the population. But we looked at a population of about 600 fish, because that was kind of a standard population, average population for some of the trids that Odenkirk had reported. And we saw and calculated that population could consume about 1,000 pounds of sunfish in a year.
Holy
about
moly.
1,000 pounds of yellow perch in a year.
Wow.
And so, really what we're talking about is a population that doesn't just eat minnows. And I think that's the point. It's like they're not just eating minnows. They're not just eating species that we don't, really regard. They are eating fish out there, white perch, yellow perch, even sunfish. People still eat and catch sunfish.
So,
one of the first species that a lot of people catch, and they are eating those. And that's the point, that they are making an impact on these other species that are important to us within the bay.
I agree.
Minnows are also important, but some people don't see them as important as they see sunfish or white perch.
Now, Joe, your 600 fish that you're talking about eating 1,000 pounds. What size are these fish? Are these basically mature fish, 18 inches up?
Yeah, so this is a typical population. So what we did is we looked at the size structure of a population. Different ages are differently sized, right? So older fish tend to be bigger than younger fish. And so we kind of calculated what that size structure would look like for 600 individuals. And so we got that size structure information from some of our surveys, and we got population size estimates from some of John Odenkirk surveys, and we meshed the two together really to kind of generate what a population would look like based on field surveys. And so they're not all 18 inches or 20 inches. They're, some are younger fish, so they're smaller fish, and some are larger fish.
So just basically a family of them. Well, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but if you take an average spawn of a snakehead from anywhere from 10 to 40,000, and in 45 days they stay with the young and they have a pretty high survival rate, probably 40% or higher. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that could be devastating.
That could be 16,000 fish
to a fishery in a very short period of time.
Yeah. So I mean, and I think I was really happy when Josh passed along this other paper that got published in 2021 out of South Korea, and
whoa, hold on, Joe. We're talking about overseas where they say there's no problems, right?
Over there, they do have a problem. They have a problem with largemouth bass and sunfish, as a matter of fact, because those were introduced and invasive. So in South Korea, I took a read of the paper and I thought it was really interesting and pulled out some useful points for us over here in North America. They actually looked at ecosystems where there were a lot of snakeheads and ecosystems where there were not a lot of snakeheads. And what they found was, in the areas where there are a lot of snakeheads, there are significantly fewer sunfish and bass. And that's because, according to their stable isotope analyses, snakeheads are eating young sunfish and older sunfish, as well as young bass. That's what they're doing. And we've seen that here. We've seen that here too, right? Right?
Yes, we have.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I'm saying, and then the other areas of South Korea where there are fewer snakeheads, they see an abundance of sunfish. And what's really interesting in those areas, those sunfish are eating zooplankton. And these authors actually saw a change in the zooplankton as a result of different abundances of sunfish. So what this means is snakeheads are potentially causing a trophic cascade effect in South Korea.
So in other words,
very cool.
Because those bluegills aren't eating all the algae and stuff and zooplankton, is that creating algae blooms and things like that?
Well, they did. So that we don't know that. They didn't jump into algae blooms or what the significance of those differences might be.
That would be good to know, though.
So can we do an exchange program with them? They'll send us bass, we'll send them snakehead.
but it was interesting to read that there are these ecological effects over there related to snakehead biomass. And I learned something else from this paper too. The area where there were fewer snakeheads, the reason there were fewer snakeheads is because people were harvesting them. People were using them medicinally, or people were just eating them. And that gives me hope, right? Because our whole point to this harvest strategy here is that it does something to abundance, that it lowers the abundance of snakeheads and helps protect our natural resources. That's why we started. And I remember back in 2010, 2011, reporters asking me, saying, well, do you think it's going to work? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. On the Potomac River, John pointed to a couple of rivers where he thinks that harvest lowered the abundance. I could look to this paper out of South Korea and say, look, harvest there is lowering abundance of snakeheads. So I have to conclude, at least based on what I've seen so far, is that, yes, harvest can lower the abundance of snakehead. It is not going to wipe them out. It is apparently didn't do it in South Korea, didn't do it here on the Potomac. I don't think it's going to eradicate them. But we can lower the abundance to the point where we're minimizing the impact on the resources that snakeheads are consuming. And I think that's really good news.
That's probably the best news you've said all day.
Harvest. Yeah.
Well, you know what I would like to see. I would like to know if we've really made any difference here, because between me and you and just looking at the nets and still the numbers that are here, I don't see that our harvest has really made that much of a difference. But I have to believe that with thousands of people coming down here through the year and fishing on these bridges and harvesting 10, 20, 30 apiece, you would almost think that would make some kind of a difference.
Well, sure, it's made a difference. If there's 30, 40, 100 people are catching on a weekend, we're there.
Yeah,
it's making a difference. It's just a matter of whether that difference is
enough to shift.
Exactly, enough to shift the populations back to where those bass and the sunfish and everything else can come back to. Hopefully establishing some sort of a semblance of a population here.
Let's
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, out, particularly in Blackwater, there, in invasive species ecology, sometimes there is, something called a fatigue effect, where, the public gets really motivated to go after a species that's invasive, but when the numbers drop a bit, or the public gets otherwise distracted, say by a pandemic, they're not going out as frequently to go after that. And so what you end up seeing is a rise in the number of snakeheads. We saw that, I think, on the Potomac. In some of our areas, we're definitely seeing increases in abundance. I've noted that there's been a decline in commercial harvest of snakehead, at least for 2020. It's less than half of what it had been.
There's no money. There's no money. I don't think these guys want to go fishing for them for this little bit of money that they're getting.
Well, it's a lot of work to them too.
Yeah, I mean it is. Got to kill them all.
You got to kill everyone as you catch them. That's
exactly.
There's one more thing that you don't normally have to do.
Joe, do you think there's anything that could help to make that easier, or is there a way that they could do it, like one mass eradication on their catch, or how do you think? What do you? I know I'm putting you on the spot here on that one, but do you think there's some ways we could help alleviate that for them for the commercial side?
So on the commercial side, I think one of the impediments is really connecting people with market.
Right.
Some folks have a harder time at that than others. I think also it's getting to the fish with commercial gear. I mean, the department did just allow a license for people who are hook and line fishing or bow fishing to commercially sell snakehead. But and it's a cheap license. It's like $15 a year, which is ridiculously cheap compared to other commercial licenses. But it is a species that's hard to get at, and not everyone wants to get into the business of commercial fishing. And unless you're going to be getting a lot of them, maybe you're not going to make money to make enough money to make it worth your while, and the aggravation of trying to get the fish to a processor or to sell them to a local restaurant. So it's hard for me to navigate those waters with a suitable solution to that. But one thing that Josh and I are going to work on in the coming year is a tagging program, at least on the Blackwater, and he and I are going to tag a bunch of fish. Right, we're going to tag a bunch of fish so we can learn something about how many are actually getting harvested. And we're going to have a reward program as part of reporting, and that will people may win. Yeah, go ahead.
That'll also tell you how they migrate as well.
That's what I was just about to say. The same thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Somewhat.
Yep.
If you tag them in the Blackwater and they wind up in the Transquicken or the Chick, that's pretty much going to tell you that they're moving.
Or if they move even to Salisbury or something like that.
That's a great idea.
I have a feeling that we're going to find some crazy numbers in migration in this tagging program.
And I think we will, because think about last year, the guys that were shooting out in the little chop tank that were shooting the rays, and they were shooting snakehead swimming with the rays,
Right.
And that I'm trying to make sense of that, Joe. Why are the snakeheads, tucked up in there with the rays? Is there some kind of scent that the rays are? What I miss, man? What I miss?
Gary's getting popcorn.
I'm trying to stay focused right now, okay?
It's just in my makeup, man. I just can't help it.
I don't know if I can answer that one.
Right. Well, I was just thinking there's got to be a reason that the snakeheads are swimming with the rays. Is there something there that's available a food source? I mean, why would they be swimming with them? I couldn't make sense of that.
I don't know. I remember. I guess it was a few years ago, maybe it was 2011, 2012. I remember seeing a photo sent to us of a snakehead in between basically the mouth of, or at the mouth of the Potomac River, heading down toward Virginia.
Yeah.
And
I remember that.
Right the sand, a ray angler, an archer, had taken the picture. So. I think they're just, or we think, me and Odin Kirk weighed in on why I was there. We think they were just, traveling through either on what we call freshets, with little freshwater areas that are stratified within the bay, or just moving through, but that they weren't really hanging out for any long period of time. That's kind of the conventional wisdom. But I'll say this, we're still learning new things. So I can't really answer your question because I don't really know. But
that's a great question.
What we saw, we're just, who knows?
Well,
you're right. So
the thing that I'm trying to understand here, we know, for me at least, when they were first here, we struggled to catch them in the winter,
Right.
and then 3-4 years into it, I approached Jim and I'm saying, hey, Jim, dude, I'm catching these fish down there with ice on the side of the river, and they're circling schools of shad like a pot of dolphins and corralling them and just ripping through them and eating them, like it's the middle of the summer, so. I have to wonder, the resilience of this fish, the way that they seem to manipulate themselves.
Well, their adaptability is
that's what I'm saying.
Crazy.
Do you think that these things are adapting to the salinity and to the salt water? The reason I'm asking that is because I've got guys down here that are shooting them right now in some really salty places like Fishing Bay, like the Hunger River.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out, wait a minute, we know they're doing good in here in the refuge. We're starting to see them spread out and be a little more thrivable, let's say, because I remember the first year or two when I would see them in a place like Madison Bay or something like that in a salty area, it seemed like they were weak. The color was the pigment was lost.
They were different.
They were sick. They just weren't healthy.
But it's not like that anymore.
And it's not like that now. Now we're seeing these fish out here in Fishing Bay and the Hunger River and Hooper's Island down there along the causeway. They're catching them on the bank.
they're in the little. They're all over the place in these salty rivers, and we don't understand why they're doing well in there.
Yeah, because originally we thought, in the beginning that the salt was not something that they could tolerate, and now I'm wondering if it's not like the winter thing. Are these fish like just true Frankenfish, just adapting to everything that they want?
Everything. Jim, tell me if I'm wrong here, but these fish are not native here, so everything that they experience is new to them, and they have to adapt to it. How their food source is here different than where they're from. Everything, they're spawning the whole 9 yards.
Everything.
So everything they encounter, they seem to be able to adapt to very well.
Yep. I mean, look, when they first arrived on the circuit, people were thinking seriously that they were primarily eating minnows, and that they weren't going to cross the Potomac River. They weren't going to move outside of the Potomac River or downstream of the Potomac River because it was too salty. I mean, those are things people were saying. And we learned that that's not the case. And what you guys are saying, who knows? What I do know is that species do adapt. And this is a new species for the area, for the United States, really. We're learning new things about it. Like I said, so far the conventional wisdom is that they just move through those areas, particularly this time of year, in their search of places to spawn. So they're going to be moving upstream. But, we are learning new things about them all the time. And you guys are, talking about catching them in a lot more saltier, brackish places than I had heard about. So who knows, right? But the tagging work might help shed some light on this. And it would be the first time anything like that has been done on the Eastern Shore. So I think, we can learn a lot, perhaps more than just exploitation. You're right. You guys, we could learn a bit about where the fish are actually going.
Would it help data-wise if some of these guys could sample the water where they're getting them and get the salinity count?
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking with CCA with Dave.
With the
that's
great
just,
invasive count.
That's one more. That's probably a category he could add to it.
Maybe that's a possibility. Yeah.
Because they're always doing weight and data, and content and all that, but salinity factor would probably be interesting to just see where especially if somebody goes out and catches 25 or 30 in a face that is clearly salty and doesn't change overnight.
I got Mark Bragger on here saying, I know commercial crabbers that caught some in the pots in the main stem outside the Patapsco last season. We got another guy here, Carmen Nicosia. Snakeheads like a roof over their head. Quote from Joe Bruce. That could be why they hide under rays. They are like little cobia, which do the same. That's a good thought.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, it could be.
That's very interesting.
Before I ask you the next loaded question, let's give away something here real quick on the podcast.
That's a good idea. That's a good place to start.
Let's give away something. So,
popcorn.
Here,
popcorn. It's a bag of popcorn.
We're all going to the movies, man. Blackwater Ed's treat. Gary, why don't you reach in the goodie box here and see what you can find in here for somebody. What you got there?
Got some candy cane here. What are these?
Candy canes.
Old school tackle.
That's it.
What's the flavor here?
That's Candy cane. You just named it.
Is it really?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It is now.
Brian, can we call that candy cane? That's some good-looking stuff right there, Mr. Brian Dog.
Shocking Yardbird, I think it's.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see what it says, Gary. Gary
doesn't have his glasses on.
It says shocking Yardbird. That's a good one. So, Gary, what do you want him to say to win that?
Yardbird.
First person put Yardbird in the comments gets that. Gary, let's give away something else. What do you think, brother?
All right, man, I'm in there. Oh, God.
Hey, no more lying. You can't lie no more. Here's a tape measure. Here's a tape measure from CCA. Dave Sikorsky over there at CCA.
Real sensor.
Yep. While we're on CCA, why don't you tell them about the great
Yeah. So count. Look. So if you want to check out the great invasive count, CCA's putting that on. You can go and you can register your fish, your catch, wherever you've caught it.
You register on the iAngler platform.
Yep. You don't have to say where you caught your fish, body, water, anything like that. We'd like to have the measurements. If you got any gut sampling there, you can add that to the program too. We're just trying to get some added support here to our surveys and our scientific data collection that we can add to what we already have. So
and the great invasive count is also our tournament sponsor of the Angler of the Year this year. So Wayne, you better CCA is sponsoring your belt this year.
Yep.
So.
If you don't know what CCA is, it's Coastal Conservation Association.
That's exactly right.
And they do a lot. They do a lot to help.
They do.
Help us.
They're
It's
great.
coastal.
Yep.
It's not just local.
Right.
You want to give away one more thing?
Sure.
All right, let's give away one more thing. Why not?
How hard is that?
Not too hard at all.
So hold on. What do you have to say to win the
Oh,
tape?
yeah. Keep it honest.
Keep it honest.
There you go.
Keep it honest, and you can have that tape measure there. We'll give away one more prize here.
There we go.
Oh, that's a nice prize there from
CCA.
CCA. Look at that.
That's an LED snip.
Yep.
Line snipper with an LED line.
An LED got a belt clip on it.
That's a nice thing there from CCA to be given away. All right, so Eddie, why don't you pick? What do you want to say for that?
Great invasive count.
Great invasive count. Say that, and then you can have that. All right, Joe, I'm going to come at you with a loaded question. My friend Paul Batters put a comment in here, and I know a lot of people have asked this question all the time.
Okay.
Game fish. Limits, bags. Do you see that as the future for snakeheads? Is this our future game fish? I mean, that's a loaded question. I mean,
I mean, do people want more regulation? Is that what they're asking?
I'm not sure. I guess they're asking if the state sees this as, is this something that the state's going to regulate and make a game fish and protect, or is this something that we're going to keep moving forward with as far as the harvest?
Well, look, I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't predict what's going to happen in 100 years. All I've got is a short-term plan, maybe 10, 15 years down the road. And right now, there is absolutely no indication that we would ever go that route. Okay. It would be counter to federal law. It would be counter to the states in the Mid-Atlantic region that, are encouraging active harvest and prohibiting live possession. In terms of the, creel limits and size limit, all of that requires a bit of science. It requires, they don't just come up, usually. They don't come up with these numbers just because, usually. And there's a program. I mean, the largemouth bass program costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's just managing tidal bass populations in the state. I don't know if people really want to spend that much money managing a species like snakehead that seems to be growing in abundance. And from all accounts, everything I've heard you guys say and what I've heard, people are not having a tough time catching this fish.
No.
So, until we run the route of, look, we need to do something because there aren't any snakeheads out there anymore, maybe those conversations will happen. But for right now, in the near future, look, I mean, they're becoming more abundant in the Upper Bay. Maybe you're having a tough time catching them where you usually go. I'd say if that's the case and you want to catch more fish, check out another location in the bay because, they are out there. And I don't see any reason. I certainly don't speak for the department, but our secretary is calling them invasive. I just don't see anywhere down the road, Maryland or any of the neighboring states, where we're going to be doing that.
If you follow the science, to me, it's just not practical to consider.
Yeah.
Okay, so John, let me let you finish. I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
No, that's fine. I was going to say because I like the idea of letting science kind of dictate our actions, and you're right. Right now, the science just doesn't indicate we don't regulate things because we want to regulate them. We regulate them because we have to, and right now, this is definitely not one of those cases where we need to protect snakeheads in our waterways.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Conowingo Dam. Okay, so Eddie, you're going to help me out here with this because you got the notes.
Yep.
So in 2010, they began to work out. What do I want to describe it as?
The joint settlement agreement.
Yeah, so they had a joint settlement agreement they've been working on since 2010, and we just came to this joint settlement agreement last month.
In March, yep.
In March, and we've got the fish ladder set up over there on the west side lift. We're hand-picking the snakeheads out, and we're putting them into refrigerated boxes. How did all this come about? I know that there was a settlement or something between MDE, I believe it was, and Conowingo or Exelon, I believe, and that's how this came about.
The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission
right, okay.
Approved of the settlement agreement. Yep.
So they approved the settlement agreement. So what we're doing over there is we're running that lift. We're removing the snakeheads by hand.
Right. Well, the agreement requires the removal of the invasive species from the fish ladder. That was the whole.
And that's all 3 species of invasive fish:
not
flatheads, blue cats,
right.
and snakeheads. Correct.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Right.
So we know we're seeing a lot of snakeheads up at Conowingo Dam. I mean, what's kind of going on there with that? The numbers that we're seeing are really, really, really alarming.
Yeah. Well, look, so, a few years ago when I was, kind of first started getting involved with this issue up there at the fish lift with Fish and Wildlife and our own folks, there weren't that many snakeheads. One snakehead, prior to the passing of one snakehead in the East Fish Lift, we had met to discuss what would we do if we started catching more snakeheads. And I want to remind you, this was a time when snakeheads had just gotten up there. We didn't think that we didn't know whether they were going to establish themselves in the Upper Bay or not. But fast forward about 2 or 3 years, and they passed 40 snakeheads in one, or they didn't pass. They caught 40 snakeheads out of the lift, and that was kind of eye-opening. It's like, oh, okay, well, they're starting to get them now. And then this past year, they started getting, the past couple of years, they started getting more and more in the lift. And then this year, the regional manager for freshwater fisheries just told me they caught 70 out of one lift, and then tomorrow I'm going to go and pick up 40. So, I mean, the numbers are increasing there. And so earlier this year, or actually last year, my boss's boss really, wanted to kind of do something with these fish because when they were only catching a few, it wasn't, we didn't really need to go up there for 1 or 2 snakeheads. When they started catching a few more than that, they were going to Pennsylvania for some scientific stuff. But when they started catching more, we decided, look, we don't want those fish going into Conowingo Reservoir, and Pennsylvania wouldn't, want all of these snakeheads. So my boss last year, kind of worked out a plan that we would, freshwater fisheries would work to get those snakeheads out of the lift and do something with them. And so that's what's going on now.
Are you surprised to see 175 snakeheads and 175 American shad as a number? I mean, does that kind of like raise your eyebrows a little bit? Because it kind of did mine.
Well, I am okay. I think there are like 2 questions there.
Maybe.
I am definitely surprised that maybe not. Actually, I can't say I'm too surprised. to see snakeheads in the lift in those numbers. When folks were telling me that they were catching them in the lift, I said, well, this is just going to continue to happen as abundance continues to increase up there.
Are we comparing the number? Are we comparing the number of snakeheads to like the small? I mean, we're getting smallmouth bass in the lift, walleye, and other fish too, rockfish, or are we just getting snakeheads and shad?
So primarily, well, shad, gizzard shad, American shad. The eels have their own lifts going up, and then I haven't heard of them really catching that many bass. I can't imagine that smallmouth are getting pushed up that lift. But when you think about and they have passed flathead catfish. They do catch flathead catfish in the lift. I don't think last I checked earlier, I guess about 3 or 4 weeks ago, they haven't caught any blue catfish in the lift.
No, they have not.
But when you think about the biology of snakeheads, though, and how they react to the base of dams, how they move upstream during this time of year to spawn, it shouldn't. I guess I wasn't too surprised to learn that the fish lifts were actually collecting snakeheads. Bass, smallmouth bass, yeah, they do move around a bit. Smallies do more during the spawning season, but they don't have that kind of behavior that snakehead do, where they're moving upstream to try and exploit the floodplain. So they tend to be more of a homebody than snakeheads do, based on the telemetry work that Josh and crew had done on snakeheads on the Potomac. I'm kind of basing movement patterns on that study, and I'm just saying that not altogether surprised that the lift is catching them versus catching a lot of bass.
Joe, I think the biggest question. I think the biggest question we've had when people started learning that you've been catching snakeheads in the fish lift is what is DNR doing with these snakeheads that are caught in the lift? Yeah,
so we definitely don't want them going into Conowingo Reservoir, right? We're trying to protect what we can protect, and thankfully Exelon is working with us, Fish and Wildlife's working with us to try and prevent that from happening. But we also don't want the snakeheads to go into a landfill. And when you're talking about, 100 or so snakeheads, and that's a lot of fish, it's a lot of meat, and we just don't want to waste it. So we're doing 2 things with them. Today, Brett Coakley, the Eastern Region Manager, actually brought some snakeheads up to JJ McDonald. What JJ's agreed to do is process these fish for us. And by process, I mean fillet them and donate them to Maryland Food Bank.
Very good.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
man, that's great.
Yeah, so hungry folks can get a taste of them, and that's great actually for the fishery, because if we get more people interested in eating snakehead, I think that they can get a fishing rod and go fishing for them, and that would be wonderful if they could do that. The other thing we're doing, like tomorrow, I'm going to head up there and I'm going to be getting 40 snakehead, but I'm going to be taking them back down to a regional office. And what we're doing with them is gutting them. So we're going to see what they're eating in the upper bay, because we don't have really data from the upper Chesapeake Bay and snakeheads. So we're going to be gutting them. We're going to be looking at gonads, going to see what kind of spawning condition they're in, and weighing and measuring them. We'll also fillet them. We'll also donate them. Donate the fillets, but in that case, the fillets usually go to a local church down there, down in Southern Region, or to other folks in the region who want to eat snakehead. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're trying not to let the food go. We're trying not to let the meat go to waste, and we're trying to learn a little something about the biology of snakehead up there. So this is the first year we're doing it. I hope that we can continue it, but it's going to cost a little money, because we're going to have to pay next year for the freezer, so for the cooler up that way to store the fish. So it does cost a little bit of money, and of course it costs staff time. So at least for the short term, we're doing this. I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to do it, but at least this year and probably next year, we'll be doing it.
Now, I know this is a whole other conversation, before I say that, money wise, Andy Harris was able to get a little bit of money for us for the state through the Congress, correct?
Right.
So we want to thank Andy for taking care of that and getting us some funding that we really, really needed. You know what I mean? So I did want to take a minute to say that. My next question.
Absolutely.
This guy, I got Roy Boyd here. He's got a little question mark with the eel lift. You mentioned eel lift. Talk a little. Can you describe the eel lift?
Well, so I only know about it through Josh. That might be a better question for him next week.
Yeah, I just want to know we're getting snakeheads in that, I guess.
That's a slippery slope.
It's a different system. It's a different system. It's actually called a eel ladder. And they just kind of move up it.
Yeah. Right. Snakeheads can't get up it. That's kind of what I wanted to kind of open the door for, you know.
Snakeheads can't get up that one. Yeah. No, they don't get up that one. That's a good one.
I'll tell you what.
If it weren't for Andy Harris, I tell you, we don't really have a dedicated program to snakeheads. And, you know, a lot of us have just, you know, including John, you know, the other states, you know, we've been doing what we can do to learn something about this species. And we've been engaging anglers and archers and trying to get them motivated to go out there after them, you know, without, you know, getting too much fatigue. And it's hard to do without a lot of resources. And so for Andy Harris to step up to the plate and look on us with this gift, I mean, I do think it's huge. Josh is going to talk a little bit more, I think, about it, because money is going to be going to Fish and Wildlife, and then we're going to be working with Fish and Wildlife on some of those initiatives. But I think he's going to talk about those next week.
Okay, I'll put him on the spot with that. I got to say, Joe, you know, I mean, I can't thank you enough for today.
Absolutely.
You know, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of break it down for the public, to really kind of show them some true value, you know what I mean? And that's all I've ever wanted to do, was just to show the public, you know, the true value in what we're seeing. And you just confirmed everything that we've already thought. And, you know, I hope that the people out there that watched today and that were listening have really listened to everything and really taken into consideration the amount of work that you guys are doing. And it's honorable, man, and it's stand up, and I appreciate it. And I know that for those of us that do care, we all appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you, not just from me, but from everybody out here in our community.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. We always love hearing that. I want to throw it back at you. Without you guys, you know, yes, this is press. This is getting the word out. But you guys do more than that. You're stewards of the resource, and I think without you, you know, we wouldn't be able to control the species. We wouldn't be able to do half of what we do as a state agency. So, you know, if folks have more questions, you know, they can reach out to me. We do have a website dedicated to snakeheads, so they can learn more about them on that website. But they're always welcome to reach out to me either by email or phone, and I'll do what I can to answer the questions too.
Well, I know just to hear that from you, you know, saying that we're doing a good job means a lot to us, because you know that, especially me, I get hate mail every day, you know. So so there's many days there's many nights that I sit home and I'm scratching my head and I'm frustrated and I'm wondering, is this all worth it? And you know what, man, it's all worth it. You know, no matter what the stress level's been, no matter what the emotions have been felt, you know, I think the end result for me is it's been worth it, you know, and I'm not giving up anytime soon. And, you know, I'm praying for a miracle. And, you know, again, I just want to say thank you. And, you know, we will look forward to Josh next week. And tomorrow when you get up there to Conowingo, be safe and let us know what you find.
That's right.
I appreciate it. Gentlemen, thank you, and have a good evening, okay?
Thank
you too, my friend. We're going to cut you loose. We're going to close out with tournaments, and then we'll give you a shout back when we get done.
That's right.
All right, well done.
Thanks, Joe.
Guys.
All right, so before we forget, tournament, it's coming up.
Hey, wait a minute. Eddie, it's your son's birthday today, isn't it?
It is my son's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Bub.
Thank you. He's 3 years old today.
3 years old.
Yep, it's crazy, man. I can't believe he's 3 years old today. It's unreal. Man, I can't.
Let's go get him and bring him over here and let him chunk some bobbers.
Man,
he just love to go in those bobber boxes and just sling them.
He just loves throwing those bobbers. It's so crazy watching him grow up. Like, just, I think the anybody who's a father knows.
You can cry.
No, I'm not going to cry.
Okay.
But anybody who's a father knows the best part about fatherhood is watching them learn something. When you see the wheels turning in their head, That's the coolest thing.
That's
All
the
right.
good stuff, brother.
It is. It really is. All right, so tournament coming up May 1st. That's 8 days away.
8 days away. And look, people, you got to get signed up. You can't come to the store and sign up in the morning.
Sign up
okay?
online. But the link is in the description of this video. Just click down below. It's right there at the bottom. It says sign up here. Just click that link, register there, and you'll be signed up for the tournament. May 1st, you have 8 days left to register if you're going to get it. It's $50 to enter. And for the Snakehead Spring Kickoff, sponsored by the Wolford Store. And you'll be fighting for the Snakehead Angler of the Year that is sponsored by the CCA Invasive Count. If you're not signed up for that yet, sign up. That's free to enter. Free to enter. You're helping citizen science. We've talked about this with Dave before. You've heard us talk about it. Citizen science is important. You document your catch, stomach contents if you're harvesting. It's fantastic for people to get involved. And we've got a special bonus. If you're in our tournament and you're in the CCA Great Invasive Count, you're automatically entered into the drawing to win this angle cooler. Kaz wants to tell me about the cooler real quick.
So the angle cooler, we got the bait cooler. It's set up.
Beautiful.
It's got battery pack. It's aerated, and it is just absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's very, very thick. It's very well insulated, and it's worth a lot of money.
It does everything but bait your hook.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
right.
much,
That's exactly
pretty much,
right.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
So sign up for our tournament. Sign up for the Great Invasive Count, and you're automatically entered. That there's nothing extra you got to do. Sign up for it. We also have Calcuttas, $10 a piece, heaviest of the tournament, sponsored by Basswork Outdoors.
Kevin.
That's longest of the tournament, sponsored by Horseman Enterprises.
Benny.
Do I got to put those on buttons for you? It's just,
You could, yeah. Yeah.
most caught in the tournament, minimum of 8 inches per fish, sponsored by the Land Group.
Rob Fryer.
Heaviest of the year, sponsored by the Crab Stand.
Who the hell's that? That's me.
And of course our free to enter youth division, always sponsored by Roy Bradshaw's Body Shop and Towing.
The only tow company I call. Look, if you're down here on the Eastern Shore and you happen to get stuck in a ditch, reach out to Roy Bradshaw's Towing and get yourself out of the ditch. Look, he'll be there fast. He'll be there and get you out, and you'll be on your way real quick.
Good folks. Man.
Absolutely. So I was going to take a minute. Our other sponsors, Denton Rod and Tackle, and Nonthaburi Custom Baits, Autumn Sky Outfitters, Old School Tackle. Great. All of those are great guys.
Nonthaburi, Chenadai, we got them coming back in the store. We're currently sold out.
Before I forget, also, winners of our giveaways. Yardbird, Matthew Martin.
Kapow!
The CCA tape, Chris Shaw.
Kapow!
And the LED snippers, Justin Airing.
Kapow! Now, before I forget, you do need to mention them about the Snakehead Club. So
I didn't even get to that. Yeah.
So if you sign up for all 4 tournaments,
now we don't have the signups live for all 4 yet, but it's coming up here soon. As soon as all 4 are live, then you can sign up for all 4. If you're in all 4, you're in the Snakehead Club automatically, free of charge.
yes.
Yep.
And
What's coming up?
And
Yes.
and at our first Snakehead Club meeting, we're going to have up in town, and that's going to be at the
American Legion.
American Legion. See, I didn't even want to attempt it, so there we go. So that's where we're going to be meeting at. And it's going to be 2 weeks roughly after the tournament, correct?
May 19th.
May 19th.
Yep.
And we will have a special guest there, and we will also have the winner of the tournament there to talk about how they won, what
Absolutely.
they used, and all that kind of stuff too. So
That's all I got.
that's all you got? You want to give away a couple of crabs or what?
Yeah, that's on you,
All
buddy.
right, so I said last week we'd give away a bushel, so this is what I decided to do. We'll break it down into 3. So we'll give 3 people, break a bushel into 3 pieces. So each of you get a third of a bushel of mixed Maryland crabs from the crab stand. You can come out and pick it up this weekend. So the winners are Zelma Parker, Kapow! Sandy Jones, Kapow! And John Vaselis. Kapow! Look, folks, we're coming up the road tomorrow with some crabs, and if you want to get some, come out to the crab stand, 21338 York Road, Parkton, Maryland, 21220, or come down to Abington at the Beverage Barn. We'll be there open tomorrow. Big Mike will be there. We'll have some deals on females and males. We'll have some shrimp. We'll have some scallops. We'll have some crab. We'll have a little bit of everything. But before I go, let me leave you with a little crabby jingle, okay? My crabs, they have 3 first names. It's heavy, full, and fat. My crabs, they have a 4th name. Absolutely mustard packed. So if you ask me where they're from, they're 100% guaranteed Maryland. Number ones, baby! At the crab stand, here's a fact I know for sure you're coming back. Kapow! Kapow!